On today's show, we're going to talk about as many NFL draft prop markets as we possibly can. Things like odds to be the first running back off the board, what position will the Chiefs take with their first pick, some long shot stuff, etc. Please note that we're going to only talk about DraftKings prices here, if for no other reason than to keep it simple and keep it simple for the people who are watching on YouTube. And by the way, if you're not subscribed to our free YouTube channel, you're missing a lot of additive stuff to the show. On YouTube, we have the DK screen displayed here. But the great part about draft props is the market is not static. The lines are so stale and all over the place. If you can find some incredible prices if you shop, please don't listen to Silva. I am begging you guys to shop for the best price in these markets, because you can find some stuff that is way, way, way better than other sites.
For the record, I've never told anybody to not line shop.
You're an influencer though, Evan. And when you say that you're not line shopping, that means they don't line shop. Okay. All right. Let's start with some of these odds to be the first off the board. So odds to be the RB1, who will be the first running back off the board? Current favorite is Trey Benson, slightly. He's plus 160. Jonathan Brooks, plus 175. Jalen Wright, plus 360. Marshawn Lloyd, plus 650. Blake Corum plus 750. I think it will be one of those five guys almost certainly. Now, last time we did a show, Evan, you mentioned you liked Blake Corum plus 600. You did not influence the line to go your way. In fact, the market said, Evan, no, we're going to Blake Corum plus 750. Does that scare you at all, Evan? And what do you think about odds to be first running back off the board?
I mean, I bet it again at plus 750, so I'm feeling just fine. So let's just break down these RBs real quick. Trey Benson, really talented, explosive, really limited production, a lot of injuries in college. Jonathan Brooks coming off the torn ACL. Jalen Wright, we talked about him with Renner, pass protection, ball security, big concerns. Why did he never carry the ball more than like 130 times in a college season? Marshawn Lloyd, 220-pound finesse back. Blake Corum, okay. First of all, we can establish that there is no elite RB in this class, and it's really a free-for-all among these top seven. This kid pass protected on tape. He does have short arms, which could work against him from a pass protection standpoint. But he didn't put the ball on the ground. He got what was blocked, and more than that, in the year previous to last, where he was banged up, he goes to the combine back to 100%. Tests better than most people expected. Daniel Jeremiah gave him a Doug Martin comparison. Doug Martin went in the first round. Now, that was a different era, but that's kind of like the type of back that he is. I think he's a distinct possibility at 37 overall. And if you could guarantee me that Jim Harbaugh takes his college running back at 37 overall, like, I think that he is the first running back drafted.
So I think the first running back off the board, if not for the ACL tear, would have almost certainly been Jonathan Brooks, right? Teams are going to be scared of the ACL tear, which has him at plus 175. You know, I don't have a strong take here, but plus 750 on Corum seems so long to me, because he's like the kind of back that coaches love. Yeah, he's not the best athlete. He's not the most explosive, but he is a winner, can carry a big workload, and allegedly, according to Tape Bros, has some of the best vision in this draft, gets what's blocked, etc. So, Amico, I know you've been lukewarm on Corum to be first running back off the board. What do you think about this market as it stands right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is you just don't want to be taking anything too short. Like, I really wouldn't take anything less than 5-1 on any of these guys. Just because anyone that is talking about this class that knows, Jeremiah, Brugler, they're all saying that depending on the team you talk to, these guys are arranged way differently. And it may even be deeper than just these first five guys. Like, we're probably not going to get a running back in the top 50. So as we've seen over the years, like, once you get past a certain point in the draft, it's really choose your flavor. And, for that reason, I wouldn't really be taking one of the top three guys. I think Lloyd is fine. I think Corum is fine. I think if there's another guy a little further down the board, if you really like Ray Davis and you think he's in that mix, I think it's fine to take a long shot here.
Yeah, there's a market who will be selected by which team. Blake Corum is plus 190 to go to the Chargers. That is really short, but the market is assuming that Jim Harbaugh is going to go and get his guy in Blake Corum there, plus 190. It's not one that I would take, but it would certainly make plenty of sense. They have a ton of holes, including at running back.
One super long shot I wanted to mention, Bucky Brooks, and whatever your opinion on Bucky Brooks is, like the dude talks to people in the league. He's a former NFL scout. He's super plugged in, just being working for NFL Network, talking with Daniel Jeremiah all the time. Will Shipley, he mentioned Will Shipley as maybe his favorite running back in this class. Will Shipley had a great 2022 season, was banged up in 2023. But I just thought that was interesting because he's 60-1 to be the first running back drafted. And again, I think this is a total free for all.
All right. Let's go to second wide receiver off the board. We're kind of going to skip over first wide receiver drafted. Marvin Harrison is minus 500. I think that Neighbors has a chance, but I would never be taking the 3-1 there. So let's go to second wide receiver drafted. There is a heavy favorite to Neighbors at minus 270. Now, Rome Odunze at 4-1, I've seen people say that they prefer him to Neighbors. I think that's a little crazy based on stuff that I've seen from an analytical perspective. However, Amico, how are you thinking about this second wide receiver off the board?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the consensus is that these three guys are pretty close. I mean, clearly, I think if we were ranking them, it would probably go Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze. But it seems like they're close enough. I mean, we're talking about three guys that are all probably off the board in the first 7, 8, 9 picks. That it is possible to me that the Giants, if they're taking the second receiver, that they might prefer a guy like Odunze over Neighbors. I don't think it's outrageous. I definitely think it's a better than 20% chance. So if I was betting here, I'd probably be taking Odunze 4-1.
Okay. I know you have a take, Evan, on who will be the number 6 overall pick, which kind of coincides here. How do you see the wide receiver market, assuming you think Marvin Harrison goes first, how do you see the wide receiver market going after that for the next two guys?
Well, I don't know, but I do think that Brian Thomas could sneak in there as either the second or the third wide receiver drafted. These are big long shot bets, okay? Brian Thomas at 60-1 to be the second wide receiver drafted. Obviously, it's a long shot, but we should be very willing to take at least sprinkles on long shots because this is the least predictable event of the year. I talk about this all the time, like the least predictable sporting event. If you match 11 players to teams correctly, which is barely 33% of the first round, like you have one of the best mock drafts in the world. So you should be willing to take long shots. And I think Brian Thomas fits into that. Daniel Jeremiah has Rome Odunze ranked ahead of Malik Neighbors, which I thought was very interesting. They're one spot apart, okay? But at 4-1, Rome Odunze to be the second wide receiver drafted, I think that there's at least a little bit of appeal to that.
There's markets who will be each pick. So who will be the number 6 overall pick? Malik Neighbors, and of course the Giants had the 6th pick. Who will be the 6th overall pick? Malik Neighbors is the favorite at plus 145 right now. That feels a little too short for me, but Evan, any thoughts on what the Giants are going to do at number 6 there?
There has been a little bit of smoke about quarterback. I think that offensive line is still something that could be addressed, but I think wide receiver. I think that they need to go wide receiver, and they'll take whoever their second graded, assuming that Marvin Harrison goes, whoever their second graded wide receiver is. I don't know who that is. Probably Odunze or Neighbors. I have, in my latest mock draft, I had Neighbors to the Giants, and I really love that fit because I think he can jump right in and be a number 1 in that offense right away.
Right. The concern for me on only getting plus 145 on Neighbors at 6 is that we don't know what's going to happen at 5, right? And so we'll talk about that a little bit more, but he could certainly go there depending on what team at 5. The Brian Thomas stuff is interesting, man. I don't know if you guys saw Mel Kiper's latest mock, and I know Mel Kiper is not the greatest mocker or whatever, but he had Brian Thomas slipping all the way to 28 to the Buffalo Bills. We also had Schefter on the show, and he said that A.D. Mitchell is a guy that he thinks is going to go higher than people expect, which may not be good news for Brian Thomas. I like Brian Thomas too, like Evan does, but I think people might have some production concerns. His over-under right now, I believe, is 15.5 under minus 135. Evan, any thoughts on where Brian Thomas goes and his over-under?
See, I like the under on 15.5, and I noticed that in Kiper's mock, and I don't that was surprising to me. I think that Mel Kiper isn't like a bad mock drafter. He's okay. Um, I I think that Brian Thomas, the fact that he led the SEC in touchdown catches, actually I think he led the nation in touchdown catches. He had 17 this past year, and he just destroyed the combine, and he has a chance to be a legitimate number one receiver in the NFL. I mean, that flying 20 stat that he had he had a faster flying 20, which is the final 20 yards in the 40-yard dash, faster flying 20 than Xavier Worthy at the size that he is. He's just like teams that build in measurables into their grades. And at this point, I think the vast majority of teams do, that build in and heavily weight athletic measurables. Like he's going to end up with a super high grade for those teams. And there's a bunch of landing spots in the top 15. I think he goes top 15.
Okay. The line has moved based probably on Mel Kiper's mock, right? Because now over 16.5 is minus 175. You can get plus 140 on Brian Thomas, under 16.5. Now, Amico, any thoughts on that as we see the line kind of moving here, stemming from Kiper's mock, I suspect?
Yeah, I mean, I like it under because I agree with Evan. Like, I think Brian Thomas is very good. I think, starting at like 12 to the Broncos, I could see him coming off. Certainly the Colts are a team that typically love high athletic players, and they could be looking for a receiving option. And I think
that's such a logical fit too. Colts.
Yeah, to replace Alec Pierce.
Yeah, go back and look at Chris Ballard's draft last year. Every single guy was like an extreme RAS, relative athletic score guy. But go ahead, sorry.
No, you're good. And I think that, Seattle being 16th, they trade down so much that's a spot where I could see like a Buffalo maybe sliding into or something and grabbing Thomas. I just think this guy's probably too good to make it outside of the top 20. 17 to me feels like his floor. Like, I'm not really sure he'd get past Jacksonville.
Okay. If 17 is his floor, then under 16.5 plus 140 is certainly strong. I think that's an interesting one for sure. How about how many wide receivers will go in round one? Now, this is an elite class, but the market is on it big time. I believe, let me just check here what it is now. Yeah, we're talking about over 6.5 plus 170, under 6.5 minus 210. So the market is basically saying it's likely going to be 6, but you get a nice price plus 170. If seven wide receivers go off the board in the first round, that is a lot of wide receivers. Amico, any thoughts on this one, over under 6.5 wide receivers in the first round?
Yeah, I think it's an under, and I think this is still playable. Like, Jeremiah has kind of been all over this in the beginning. Like, there's so much depth at receiver, and there's such little depth at, tackle, for example, that at the end of the first round, like, you're going to see the offensive linemen coming off the board and these receivers getting pushed into day two. There's just too many of them. Albert Breer had an article, I want to say either yesterday or Monday, saying that he thinks it could only be 5 receivers in the first round. Todd McShay said the same thing in a podcast. So, like, I think that we're kind of trending closer to 5. I think 5 hits way more often than 7. Obviously, you're paying for it, but I think this is probably one of the best bets out there right now.
Okay.
Yeah, minus 210 is not fun to bet on. I had 6 in my initial mock, super rough draft mock. But yeah, I mean, that position scarcity, this position is not scarce in this draft. And therefore, that leads me to, and whereas like offensive tackle kind of is, it's actually a really good offensive tackle class, but there's only 6 good ones. And then there's like a big drop off. So I've heard some smart people say that they think like all those offensive tackles go in the top 15. And, and then, Xavier Worthy maybe falls out. A.D. Mitchell maybe falls out. Troy Franklin, maybe doesn't go. So that's how you get to 5 or 6 wide receivers. I think it is a good bet. It's just the odds are boring.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. One that I thought was interesting was which team will select Xavier Worthy. Chargers are 25-1. Now, they would probably need to make some kind of trade to get into this, but this team has no wide receivers right now. And I actually I think Xavier Worthy is going to go in round 1. Like, I think his archetype, his profile goes in round 1 so often. And there's so many sharp people out there who like aren't brushing this kid off like he's just a speedster. He can actually play. And given the way the NFL has been going with so much motion and the rules all favoring the offense, it's just easier for 165, 170 pound guys to win in the NFL now. So I think he'll go in round 1. Chargers 25-1 though. That was in Mel Kiper's mock also. He mocked Chargers trading and getting Xavier Worthy. So I thought that one was interesting. Any thoughts on that? And then I also wanted to talk about Chargers first pick one. But Evan, I'll let you go first. What do you think about Xavier Worthy? I know you like the long shot stuff, 25-1 to the Chargers.
I think it's fine. I also think that there is a chance that he could be there at 37 overall. I mean, you listen to some of the better draft analysts, and they're like kind of highly critical of Xavier Worthy. Now, he's really good with the ball in his hands, as he showed as a return specialist at Texas. He ran that insane 40 time. I like Daigle's actually early bet on the Dolphins to take him because he so much fits what the Dolphins like to do, what Mike McDaniel likes to do offensively, and they need another weapon. But I'm backing off this one, I think, ultimately.
Amico, any thoughts on that? And then Chargers position of first pick selected. They are now minus 110 to take an offensive lineman with their first pick. Obviously, they have the number 5 pick. There's speculation they could trade it. Wide receivers plus 125. Amico, any thoughts on what the Chargers do here in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, the Worthy bet is fine. I mean, they could even get him at 37. So I think that that's definitely in play. In terms of the first pick, I just think that there's way too much concentration on O-line and receiver. I mean, Harbaugh does not care about wide receivers at all. Like, and not just because they cut the 2 guys, or, you know, they traded Keenan Allen, but they let these 2 guys go. You know, they just never have prioritized that position at any point in his head coaching tenure. You know, whether it's the Niners, whether it's at Michigan, they really didn't even recruit good wide receivers over there. So I think the receiver is like way further down the board here. And I think that it makes a lot of sense for them to not even make this pick at 5. Like, I think them trading back, even if it goes quarterback X4 to start, I think the odds of them trading back are really good because this is a team that has so many holes. I mean, obviously they lack receiving talent. We know that they need a little bit of help on the offensive line, but they have holes all over their defense. Like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa are both probably gone next year. So I just think that there's a lot of potential here for a move back. I think there's a lot of potential that they go defense. So I'm looking at corner plus 750, D-line edge 10-1. And I think those are great bets because those are absolutely positions that this team needs. And, you know, we know that Jim Harbaugh, everyone's talking about how much he loves to run the football. He also cares a lot about defense. So I think that is worth playing.
Yeah. I think that's super interesting. And Harbaugh laughs in the face of people who are like, oh, positional need is wide receiver or offensive lineman. I think he's willing to take anything. By the way, back to that Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy to the Dolphins is down to plus 750. That's too short for me, man. I mean, my God. But market is clearly on that Worthy to Dolphins fit now. Okay, anything else at wide receiver? Anyone odds to go round 1? I saw Troy Franklin was plus 350 to go round 1. I thought that was at least worth mentioning. Let me see here. Anyone else you guys will mention at the wide receiver position? We released the Xavier Worthy to go round 1 around minus 110. It's now minus 250. Any other wide receivers you want to mention that could go in round 1? Lad McConkey is plus 160 now to go in round 1. Amico, anyone stick out to you here at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I mean, I think Franklin's definitely playable. Lance Zierlein was like answering a bunch of questions on Twitter yesterday, and he mentioned that Franklin's a guy that could sneak into round 1. So I think that that's reasonable. The other receivers, I mean, I think, you know, Mitchell obviously has the best chance, but he's minus 750. So like, you're probably just not going to bet it unless it's part of like a parlay or something. So I think Franklin, if you're looking at just the receivers, is probably the best play.
Yeah, adjusted for the odds, especially at plus 350, I think he's worth a shot, and I think we can move on.
Okay.
This.
All right, let's move to quarterbacks. So odds to be the number 2 pick. Let me find this here. Jayden Daniels is now minus 165. Drake May is plus 140. Evan created a stir on Twitter yesterday, an unwanted stir on Twitter yesterday by dropping a little note in his mock which suggested that Jayden Daniels might not go to Washington at 2. Now that remains the favorite. Again, Jayden Daniels minus 165 to go to Drake May plus 140. Evan, do you want to clear the air on your mock? And what are you thinking on your number on this market here, odds to go number 2?
Yeah, when I'm doing a mock, like I'm not reporting, and I'm not a reporter. So when like these aggregate like ML football or whatever, and JPA football, and even Dove Kleinman to some extent pick up things like that, and then they call it a report, like that's a lie where they're trying to generate clicks and notifications or whatever the hell they call it, impressions, engagement. Yeah. So I'm not like reporting anything, but I mean, if I hear something, like I'm trying to parse between, who am I going to put at 2? Who am I going to put at 3? If I hear something like, I'm going to use that to parse it. I'm not a reporter. Okay. But I'm trying to provide some reasoning under each guy, why I'm slotting them there. And I heard that Jayden Daniels meetings with New England have gone better and he would love to play for Gerard Mayo. And his meetings have gone better with New England than they have with Washington. And that doesn't mean that Washington isn't going to take him at number 2. If they're in love with the player, I think that they might be willing to take on some of that risk and, work out. I mean, they have a meeting on Monday. It's a top 30 visit. He's going to Ashburn, Virginia to go meet with, and, I still think Jayden Daniels could go too, especially because Schefter's out here saying it repeatedly. And probably in my next mock, I mean, there's a good chance that I'll put Jayden Daniels at number 2. So I hope that clears that up. I am not a reporter. I don't pretend to be just because ML football says that it was not a report. God. All right.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. I'm a little surprised that Daniels is minus 165 here. Amico, I assume it's a lot to do with what Schefter has been saying over the last couple of weeks, because I thought that Drake May was kind of the consensus. Everybody liked him as the second quarterback. What do you think about this odds to be the number 2 market? Again, Jayden Daniels minus 165, Drake May plus 140, JJ McCarthy plus 400.
Yeah, man, I think this is priced pretty appropriately. I mean, I'm not under the impression that Adam Peters is going to be leaking very much based on his experience at the 49ers. So I think that there's a chance that obviously nobody knows. But if you just look at the reporting, I mean, Schefter obviously on this show mentioned that he thinks it'll be Daniels, but like Albert Breer has been all over that. Todd McShay has been all over that. Like it's a lot of people. It's a lot of 1 seeds out there, saying that Daniels is the favorite. So I think it's reasonable for him to be the favorite. I don't think that we know, because if we knew, it'd probably be like minus 1,000,
Yeah.
But I think it's a reasonable lean right now.
Okay. You can get Jayden Daniels to the Patriots. And I think, Evan, you probably took this, Jayden Daniels to the Patriots plus 155. Do you still like that one, Evan? The Daniels to Patriots match plus 155.
I do still like it. I mean, at plus money, and then Drake May plus money to go number 2. Yeah, I mean that's how it got. I would chase the plus money when we don't know. I'm willing to just go with the plus money.
So one thing I did take, which was on FanDuel, they had the trifecta up. In other words, you try to get 1, 2, 3 all right. I got plus 230 on it, going Caleb, then Drake May, then Jayden Daniels. So if you're looking to get a little bit longer odds, certainly, I don't know if that line is still up, but it was up, the plus 230 on the trifecta there. What Evan's saying.
One more 1 seed, and you already named 3 1 seeds, and I'll give the 4th 1 seed to Daniel Jeremiah. He has talked about how he believes that the Commanders gave up Sam Howell for like pick swaps because they kind of wanted to, because Washington gave up Sam Howell for pick swaps because Sam Howell and Drake May are like really close boys from UNC, and they didn't want that dynamic in their quarterback room with Drake May coming and taking Sam Howell's house, basically. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I think it's rooted in speculation. Or, I mean, I think it's speculation rooted in something that he's probably heard. But just to throw that out there, I don't know. We got 2 weeks, and hopefully we can figure it out before the draft. But I'm chasing the plus money when we don't know.
Okay. Let's go to the JJ McCarthy stuff. Obviously, there's been a rapid rise in JJ McCarthy's market. His number now is over under 5.5. Under 5.5 is minus 200. Over 5.5 is plus 1 60. Obviously, a lot of speculation that it could go QB times 4 to start this draft, with McCarthy being the 4th. Amico, any thoughts on JJ McCarthy's current over/under here at 5.5?
I think it's just a no bet. I mean, maybe the best line is 4.5, not 5.5, but I just couldn't stomach falling for this again with the quarterbacks. Like, oh, we're gonna get 4 quarterbacks to start the draft, and then McCarthy ends up at like 11 or something. Like,
Yes.
Not that I'm saying that's gonna happen, but I think that there's some paths to McCarthy slipping just a little bit further than this that maybe we're not considering. One of those being that, maybe Minnesota or the Giants, like these quarterback teams, maybe they just really want to move up if it's Drake May. And if it's JJ McCarthy, they're kind of content to sit and wait a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me. So I think at the price, I'm probably just sitting this one out.
Yeah, and for some context, like Amico hates quarterbacks. He thinks he thinks you can win without him.
No,
So,
I know what's going on. Amico got burned last year by Will Levis, falling all the way to round 2, and he's tilted, and now he's too tilted to stand it.
And waking up in a cold sweat for months.
Evan, any thoughts on where JJ McCarthy ends up going? Again, it's over under 5.5. Over is plus 160.
again, when we don't know, and I think that there's just a strong lack of clarity here, I'm taking the plus money at plus 160. I had McCarthy fall into 11 in my latest mock. I think that there was like a push right around the combine, maybe because he interviewed really well for McCarthy to like even go number 2. Even Tom Pelissero, who's really good, reported that as a possibility. But I think that has kind of cooled off, and I think that as teams and analysts have dug more into what JJ McCarthy actually put on tape, like he is, and his production in college, I don't think he's going to go as high as people thought, maybe right around the combine time. And I think that he could fall to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 for sure.
Okay, which brings us to how many quarterbacks will go in the first round total. Now, part of Evan's mock that people were up in arms about there, how could you have Bo Nix and Michael Penix both in the top 15? The market is currently suggesting that maybe 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. I don't think any of them, and most people don't think they're going to go in the top 15. So, Evan, any comments on that? And what do you think about over under 4.5 first round quarterbacks? You have to lay money on over 4.5 minus 200 right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't take that because the minus 200. Bo Nix is the guy that I'm shakiest on. I think that Penix is going to go first round because he's such a talented thrower of the football. And I think he's going to go in the first round because I think that those first 4 are going to go in the top 11, and there's going to be at least one more. Bo Nix is the guy. I'm going to put him at 12 to the Broncos. I don't think he belongs at number 12 overall from a skill standpoint, but there have been enough analysts that I trust. Mike Renner, Lance Zierlein, both love him. I think that this is like the most quarterback neediest year that I can remember. So I'm being the square, thinking that there are between 5 and 6 quarterbacks in the first round, but I'm not betting that at minus 200.
Okay, Amico, this is outrageous. Maybe you don't think it's outrageous. Bo Nix to be selected by the Denver Broncos is now minus 175. Bo Nix to the Broncos, like everybody's connected. Oh, Bo Nix is perfect for minus 175 to go to the Broncos. I mean, either someone knows something or that's a wild line. What do you think about over under 4.5 quarterbacks in the first round and all this Bo Nix stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just an under guy here. Like, I think that historically going under on the quarterbacks has been very profitable. I feel like every year we talk about, oh, this guy will get into the first round, this guy will get into the first round, and it just like never really happens. Now, I think that Nix and Penix are probably guys that have been considered in this range before, so it's not necessarily like an out of the blue thing. But these guys are both 24 years. They're going to be 24 years old by the time the season starts. Penix has had 4 season-ending injuries. Bo Nix, I'm pretty sure, just like isn't any good. Like, he doesn't do anything like super special. Like, I don't know. McShay was like really kind of ripping into the things that he's heard about him in a podcast with Ryan Russillo over at The Ringer. Like, he just said, like, no one he's talked to has a first round grade in this guy. And I think that kind of checks out. And, every now and then you get a team like the Giants that like really badly reach at quarterback because they need one. It just doesn't happen that often. And I'm just willing to kind of bet on those historical trends and go under here.
Okay. If you want to think that Bo Nix is a round one pick. Over under 32.5 on Bo Nix. Under is plus 130. So you can get plus money on Bo Nix to go in round one right now. There's probably some better lines out there on that than there even is, and better ways to bet it than there is here. But yeah, 32.5 under on Bo Nix plus 130. Evan, what do you think about that one?
I just say I think it's okay and not super exciting.
Okay. Let's go to offensive line. Who will be the first offensive lineman drafted, if I can find it here for our YouTube friends? Who will be the first offensive lineman selected? Joe Alt is a massive favorite, minus 400. Then Fuaga, then Fashanu. I'm sure I'm butchering those names. I'm not going to try to say their first names. Evan, any thoughts on your boy Joe Alt, of course, out of Evan's Notre Dame, going first offensive lineman off the board?
I mean, I think that he is like a big time favorite and he's priced that way. But I'm willing to take some shots at other guys that might appeal to Jim Harbaugh if he's going to take an offensive line at an offensive lineman at number 5. Because Joe Alt is 6'8", 6'8" finesse, like maybe like left tackle only. And the Chargers already have a pretty good left tackle in Rashawn Jenkins.
Slater.
So what's that?
Sorry, go ahead. Rashawn Slater, right?
Rashawn Slater, yeah, out of Northwestern. So, you know, I'm willing to take some shots. And the shot that I would take, well, there'd be 2 shots that I would take at longer odds, would be Fuaga, who I think that Jim Harbaugh might see as like a Mike Iupati type of player to play at right tackle or even guard. And then Fashanu out of Penn State, who apparently was supposed to be rated as the number 1 tackle entering the 2023 draft, but he went back to school. He's 6'6", 312, 34-inch arms, you know, had 2 really good seasons at left tackle to close out his career for Penn State. Obviously tested well because he went to Penn State. So I don't know, just kind of betting that maybe Jim Harbaugh isn't in love with Joe Alt and doesn't think that he can help, that he's a right tackle. But maybe he sees that in some of these other guys at longer odds, Fuaga and Fashanu.
Yeah. Any offensive lineman thoughts here, Amico? I mean, it seems like the market is pretty convinced that Joe Alt is the best in this class.
Yeah, I think it's overconfidence. I mean, I'm waiting on this a little bit just because Breer put out like he'd be a little surprised if it wasn't Alt as the first lineman. And I think previously he had a little bit more up in the air. But yeah, I just think that when you have a class that's this good, there is going to be an element of what fits our team the best. You know, if the Chargers trade back and the Titans are taking the first lineman, even like I'm still not really convinced that it's Joe Alt. Like I know that they need a left tackle and he's a left tackle, but Olu is too. And he was a really good prospect also, as Evan mentioned. So I think that there's some reasons to believe that this is more up in the air than the odds suggest. I think Fashanu would be my favorite, but you could probably craft an argument for 3 or 4 guys here.
Well, you see that Fashanu number 5 pick, 45 plus 4,500. And then it's 40-1 for a Fashanu to go in the top 5. I would just take him being the number 5 pick instead of betting him to go top 5.
Yeah, to be clear, this odds to be number 5 market is really interesting because there's so many trade possibilities, right? So who will be the number 5 overall pick? Neighbors is plus 220, Harrison plus 275, McCarthy plus 275, Alt plus 475. Then you get into the long shots, including the guys that Amico and Silva were just talking about. Fuaga plus 2,500, Latham plus 2,500, Fashanu plus 4,500. So yeah, really interesting. I don't know. Any thoughts there, Amico, on who will be the number 5 overall pick?
No, I mean, I think 4 and 5 are like the toughest picks to nail down, but there's so much variance here. Like, honestly, the guy that I would probably bet the hardest, that I would like the most, would probably be Drake May at 18-1. Like, if Nate Daniels goes 2 and Bob Kraft says, give me the Michigan guy at 3, and then the Cardinals are like, yeah, we'll just take Marvin Harris. Like, it's possible, you know? But I don't really love this market at all.
Okay. Joe Alt's over-under was 7.5 minus 205. You know, I don't think Evan wants to lay that price, but yeah, Evan, any thoughts on that total there on Joe Alt? It's 7.5 under minus 220 now.
See, I think that he is like just not going to get past Tennessee because they need a true left tackle, and that's exactly what Joe Alt is.
Mm-hmm.
You put him next to Peter Skoronski, and like that ideally would be your your left tackle, left guard combo, and then they just signed Lloyd Cushenberry. All of a sudden, maybe you got a decent offensive line after having like the worst for the last couple years.
Yep. All right. Some things that we get on the draft, and shout out to DraftKings for, I know it's not a very liquid market, but at least they're putting this stuff up. How many from each conference will go in the first round? The ACC line has moved a ton. One that I think we did want to touch on was how many Big 12 players will go in the first round. Obviously, I already talked about Worthy. I think he goes in the first round, but I don't have any information there or anything. But yeah, Amico, what do you think about how many Big 12 players go in round one? Over 3.5 is minus 155. Under 3.5 is plus 125.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have two stone cold locks in Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas, and Tyler Guyton, the tackle from Oklahoma. Then you have the two Texas receivers, A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. Like, you could just bank it right there, possibly. But BYU also has a tackle, Kingsley something that I can't pronounce and won't try. But he seems pretty popular in this like late round one range. Also, and then you go a little bit deeper than that, there's like the center, Zach Frazier. So there's quite a few players here. I mean, I think we're basically locked into three. And then it's a matter of, do we get the second Texas receiver and do we get the BYU tackle? I think that the odds of that are probably closer to like minus 200 than minus 155. So I think it's playable.
Yeah. And if you listen to Schefter, he seemed very convinced that A.D. Mitchell was going to go in round one. So that would be 3 locks. And then you need one of Worthy or one of those other guys that Amico was talking about. Defensive stuff. So how about first defensive back drafted, Evan? I haven't thought a lot about this market, actually. What do you think about odds to be the first cornerback off the board here? I don't want to say his name. Quinion Mitchell is minus 190 as the favorite right now.
Yeah, that's not bettable. I think that my feeling right now is that Quinion Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, and Nate Wiggins are real tight together right now. And I think that Kool-Aid is kind of in the mix, but his stock is kind of fallen, it seems. But he still might be the best press man corner in the draft. And then Cooper DeJean had an unbelievable pro day and showed that he is over that injury that he suffered to end his season in November last year. But the scouting reports that I've read on him are that he's athletic, but he's stiff on the field, and he might have to go to safety. I don't know if that's anything related to his skin color or anything like that. But I really like Nate Wiggins here, and that's because I think he might be the best cover corner, like just pure cover corner in the draft. He's 6'2", 173. Now that's light, but he's really tall and can maybe add some pounds to his frame because he ran freaking 4.28. And everyone says that his recovery speed shows up. I mean, I was reading one scout talking about how he thinks that Nate Wiggins is even faster than that on tape, which is an insane thing to say, or a wild thing to say when he's running 4.28. He had 3 interceptions last 2 seasons, returned 2 for touchdowns. And again, I think he's really tightly bunched with these other guys that are much shorter odds. 20-1 to be the first DB drafted. Like, I really like Nate Wiggins here.
2 questions for you, Amico. I know you worked on the database of prospect profiles. Is Kool-Aid actually this dude's name on his birth certificate? Is his name actually Kool-Aid? And second, what do you think about this odds to be the first corner off the board market?
No, his name is not Kool-Aid. It's
okay.
I forget what it is, but it's like something else that's got like an apostrophe, or I don't know. Everyone calls him Kool-Aid.
Okay.
And then my thoughts on this market is that I just wouldn't bet it because I think that the first 2 guys are a clear tier above everybody else. I mean, Jeremiah has Arnold as his top-rated corner, but he has very, very consistently said he thinks Mitchell comes off the board first. So there's just not enough conviction, I think, here for me. And I think that Wiggins is just like not even really close personally. Not to poo-poo your bet, Evan. I just think he's small. He's like not a dog, doesn't tackle. I think he has a better shot of like falling out of the first round than being the
Well,
first one.
his common comparison is DRC, who did go in the first round. I don't know. I think you can poke holes in the guys in front of him. Quinion Mitchell
Yeah.
played in the MAC. Okay, Terrion Arnold ran 4.51. Cooper DeJean, I don't know. Want to like him, but there seem to be enough holes in his game. If you want a cover corner who can really run and isn't going to get beat deep, and defenses and offenses are obsessed with the explosives nowadays, and Nate Wiggins isn't going to give that up. I mean, I think that he's got a shot at 20-1. I think it's worth it.
I don't think this is a bet at all, but I just want to say I saw some highlights of Cooper DeJean playing basketball. Oh my God.
Yeah, dude.
He was out there dunking on people hard. I mean, the dude looks like he can really, really ball.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. Okay. Anything else on defense before we get out of here? First defensive player selected, I thought was an interesting matchup. Who'll be the first defensive player off the board? Dallas Turner is minus 120. And then if you don't think it's Dallas Turner, you can get a lot of good plus money on other guys. Amico, any thoughts on this? Who will be the first defensive player off the board market?
Yeah, so I am into the idea of one of the edge rushers, not Turner, so like Latu and Verse, but they have taken a lot of action over the last like 24, 48 hours. So now it's plus 330 for Latu, plus 400 for Verse. I wouldn't really bet that. Like I'd rather just bet one of those guys to go in the top 10 at like slightly shorter odds than take them here. So I do think pretty strongly that it's not going to be Turner. I just don't know if I have a guy that I love enough to place a wager on.
Yeah, well, Turner's odds have been coming down, Evan. Like Byron, like all these guys have gotten shorter. Byron Murphy was 18-1 or 20-1 at one point. He's 11-1 now. Amico mentioned Latu and Verse are both coming down. So the market is coming around to Dallas Turner not being the first defensive player off the board. Any thoughts on this one, Evan?
Dallas Turner is just goes 8 to the Falcons in like every mock. But yeah, I'm also open to the Falcons potentially taking Jared Verse 4-1. I don't know if it's. I think it's a decent bet. I've heard that Byron Murphy is not going to get past Seattle at 16. So I think that's somewhat intriguing. I don't know. I might just take a shot on Verse and Byron Murphy and call it a day here.
Okay. This was fun. I think it's interesting not just talk about it from a betting perspective, but also like helps me get my head around these prospects better by thinking of it through a betting perspective, because quite frankly, I retain information so much better when I'm actually betting on it anyways. So yeah, this was super interesting. If we think that there are more markets to talk about, we'll be back with another episode like this closer to the draft. Also, if you are a Draft Kit Pro subscriber, you have access to the NFL Draft Props channel. Amico, Daigle, Court, bunch of guys are in there, all of us in there, talking about this and talking about some bets that are out there. So be sure you are in the Discord. That's going to do it for this Draft Props show as we careen towards the draft. Coming up next week, Jordan Reed, draft analyst from ESPN, is going to join us to talk about draft rumors, prospects, etc., etc. Stay tuned for that. For Evan, for Amico, for producer Ryan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.